bills affordable. Energy and material efficiency reduces electricity demand by 2030 terawatt hours. In 2013, 30% of electricity demand today, building codes and energy performance standards, which restrict the sale of the least efficient appliances and lighting, make up 60% of the savings. Energy demand for fans and air conditioners still quadruples over decades as urbanization and climate change rapidly increase the need for cooling in Africa, calling for a strong focus on efficient cooling solutions. So our panelists are going to help us look at the African energy demand, how available and efficient is it in our continent today. Leading this panel is Mr. Victor Okoronko. Mr. Victor is the Managing Director of HITU. Please join me to welcome him on stage. Mr. Victor, please. He will be followed by Mrs. Irogama Obefon. She is the Managing Director of Stars Investments. Ms. Irofis, you're welcome. To round up their discussion is our esteemed in the house, in person of Dr. Wisdom Enag. Dr. Wisdom, you're welcome. So we'll be giving the three panelists on stage 30 minutes to hear their thoughts on this topic, starting by the lead presenter, the lead speaker. But before the comments, I'm going to call on Faith to come help us read their profiles. So Faith is social content and IT office for lawyers in Energy Network.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Faith Oyi Solomon. I'll be reading the profile of our distinguished guest this morning. The first on my list is Mr. Victor Okoronko. Good morning, sir. Mr. Victor Okoronko is the Managing Director of ATO. Victor is the Group Managing Director of ATO, Easter Exploration and Production Limited, Nigeria's foremost independent oil and gas. Victor has over 30 years of extensive oil and industry experience working with international oil companies and independents. He has held several strategic leadership board level and senior management positions in the energy sector, spanning oil, gas, and power. He held a BSc, MBA, PGD, natural gas management, certificate on business sustainability, and journey to net zero, and lots of other business and professional licenses and certifications from institutions across the world. He is a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Survivors, the Chartered Institute of Project Management, and a member of the Institute of Directors. Victor played active roles in the conceptualization of the Nigerian Gas Master Plan and the implementation of Nigerian electricity privatization programs. He has held several industry positions, including two-time chairman of the Gas Committee of the Oil Producers Trade Section of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industries, and the lead of the OPTA's Power Workstream, shareholder representative, and member of the board of the Gas Aggregation Company Nigeria. Member of the Steering Committee of the West Nigerian Delta Central Processing Facility, Vice President and two-time Council Member of the Nigerian Gas Association, and Executive Member of the Independent Petroleum Producers Group, Victor remains an industry thought leader and influencer. A round of applause for Mr. Victor Omomo. The next on my list is Mrs. Irogama Ogbefun, Managing Director, Stars Investment Company Limited. Permit me, ma, I love calling you Eurostars. Irogama graduated from Christland College Idimo in 2002. She was admitted to the University of Massachusetts, Boston to study medicine. However, she switched to biology and psychology. She graduated in 2007. She also earned a master's in public health from the prestigious Brunel University in London. She's also an alumna of the Harvard Business School. In 2010, while on holiday in Nigeria, Irogama established Heaven Limited. In 2013, she emerged the winner of the MTN Maiden edition of the reality show, The Next Titan. She's one of the two Christian alumni that have won this entrepreneurial reality show. In 2014, Irogama was recommended by a consultancy firm to serve in an executive capacity in Stars Investment Company Limited. In September of the same year, she was officially appointed as an executive director, and subsequently she assumed the role of the chief operating officer of Stars Investment Company Limited. Stars Investment Company Limited is a ship-owning and marine logistics provider with a fleet of vessels that provide offshore support to various international oil companies. In February 2021, she was appointed as the company's managing director and chief executive officer. In 2019, she was elected chairman, finance and membership committee of the Ship Owners Association of Nigeria, SOAN. She's the first woman to occupy that position in the history of the association. She is also a director of the Eagle Watch Security Company, a security firm. She is also a member of the Institute of Directors in Nigeria. Please, permit me to introduce Ms. Eurostars again. Lastly on my list, I have Mr. Wisdom Eyang. Good morning, sir. Consultant. Engineer Dr. Wisdom Eyang is a quintessential leader, technocrat, and astute scholar who is from Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. He obtained his undergraduate master's and doctorate degrees in mechanical engineering from the University of Bath, and a leading institution in engineering in the UK. He currently serves as an operations engineering consultant. Prior to this, Dr. Eyang served as an engineering technical lead, responsible for the project management and design engineering oversight for more than 20 oil and gas execution projects between the year 2015 and the year 2020. The scope of the responsibilities under his leadership included integrity restoration for brownfield projects, front-end engineering design, and detailed engineering design for greenfield projects. Dr. Eyang is a chartered engineer with the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, UK, a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of the Safety Engineers, and an international published expert in the field of engineering. His areas of research include carbon capture, energy economics, operations integrity management, oil and gas policy formulation and implementation, enhanced oil recovery and operations digitization. In addition to providing technical advice on the Nigeria Oil and Gas Industry Reform Program, Dr. Wisdom is also a public commentator within the petroleum and natural resources sectors, covering the following topic: governance, domestic gas sector development, local content policy formulation and implementation, statutes and regulation, policy design and implementation. He is a renowned expert whose contribution to the development of oil and gas in Nigeria has been featured in a number of public communication media. Dr. Eyang's unrivaled contribution have been recognized both nationally and internationally, with accolades from several renowned professional institutes, including a key scientific article certificate presented by the Advances in Engineering Society, a certificate of recognition presented by the Multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute, a recognition award presented by the prestigious Lawyers in Oil and Gas Network Group, to name a few. Dr. Wisdom has proven to be a benevolent leader through his various contributions to vocational, national, building extracurricular activities, including tutoring, youth empowerment, mentoring and training. He currently works as a volunteer in the following capacities: peer reviewer for a number of national and international engineering journals in the energy, speaker for energy-related conferences, mentor with Young Engineers Entrepreneurship Club Africa, pioneer secretary for the Young Engineers Entrepreneurship Club Fellowship Council. Dr. Eyang is happily married and blessed with a daughter. He loves supporting and investing in technology and agriculture. A round of applause for Dr. Wisdom Eyang. At this junction, I would like to welcome back to this Miss Rakiba Oloko. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith, for that wonderful recitation. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Mr. Victor Okoronko to take his lead speak.
Good morning, everybody. I think the lady that made the introduction, her delivery was so good. I felt like handing over this paper for her to deliver. So could you please give her a round of applause? And thank you, Rakila, for chasing me around to be able to extract this commitment. And I believe that after today, you will stop chasing me for subscription payment. Because this is coming pro bono. Okay, I like to put myself under properly established protocol. Whether it was done yesterday or today, it doesn't matter, but I respect that. This morning, we will be looking at the African energy demand, all the So my delivery will be touching upon various aspects, looking at Africa, and then also not forgetting home. In 1850, at least one person was reported to have challenged that, to say it was an immoral act. And his reason was that God placed oil under the earth to provide fuel to burn the dead, the wicked. But today, even the righteous who are on the surface of the earth are threatened as we face the threat of global warming. Now, energy transitions have been defined as a significant structural change in an energy system regarding both supply and demand. But economies evolve, essentially by technology and innovation. Between the 1800 to the 1900, the Industrial Revolution and steam-powered machinery drove the transition from biomass to coal. By the early 1900s, the world had started to use oil. And by the middle of 1900, with the development and improvement in pipeline construction, natural gas started to penetrate various economies. But in recent times, the awareness around climate change has triggered a shift from an energy mix based on fossil fuels towards a mix of renewable sources in order to reduce emissions that are harmful to the environment. However, these renewables have limitations. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as I proceed. And they struggle to provide the large-scale base load supplies comparable to the scales of what fossil fuels can produce. Let's look at the climate change dimension. Africa contributes about 3% of the global emissions, but suffers disproportionately from the impact of climate disasters. With a population of about 1.2 billion people, Africa has about 600 million people without access to electricity, and nearly 900 million people without access to clean cooking fuels. About 431 million of the African population are described as living in extreme poverty. The irony, however, is that Africa holds about 7% of the global oil and gas reserves, and nearly half of these reserves are in Nigeria. Our country, Nigeria, has a population of about 200 million people. About 133 million, over 50% of that population, is described as multidimensionally poor. 54% of the 200 million have no access to electricity. And despite being the largest hydrocarbon resource holder in Africa, Nigeria does not even rank among the top 20 countries in per capita utilization of LPG. There is a direct correlation between energy consumption and the well-being of a people. You will all know that as your economic situation improves, then you begin to fire more air conditioners, you begin to watch more TVs, you begin to, use almost
recording in progress.
You begin to use everything that requires electricity. So the challenge, therefore, for Africa, and indeed Nigeria, is how to leverage these huge energy resources to lift the steaming population from poverty whilst ensuring energy access, affordability if you like, ensuring energy security, and then also ensuring environmental sustainability. Oliver Wyman and the World Energy Council have defined this tripod as the energy trilemma. Though Africa is acclaimed to be rich in renewables, these renewable sources still have limitations and require significant capital for investment. Some of the limitations, aside the huge capital investment requirements, are one, variability, because they are based on nature and supply fluctuates within the day. There is also the geographical barriers, uneven supply density, and to maximize efficiency, solar and wind plants are often located in remote regions away from centers of demand. And this is because they require a large land footprint for installation. There's also the issue of transportation fuel. The renewables have really not proven to be able to support large-scale marine and air transportation. They are still at the experimental stage, but there is some way to go. Therefore, to meet the rising demand for electricity, as you will know today, the world is spending a lot more towards electrification than in drilling. And renewables need to be supported with reliable base load, primary energy, which is readily available, affordable, and is less polluting. So in this context, natural gas fits the bill, and Nigeria has been described as a gas country rather than an oil country. Energy security implies the ability to meet the current demand of energy, and then also the infrastructure network system. So you don't hear about grid collapse that shuts some parts of the country off for a few days. So, however, for Africa, to strengthen the issue of capacity, ability to provide large-scale base load supply, and the issue of security, the whole infrastructure robustness, creates a dilemma for Africa, because the choice Africa has to make is on one hand between the cheaper sources that it has in abundance to maintain affordability or access, or to then go towards more the expensive renewable sources, which then provides or assures environmental sustainability. So consequently, for Africa to build a strong basis for prosperity and competitiveness, individual countries must balance the three core dimensions of this energy trilemma, which, again, for emphasis, are energy access or affordability, energy security, and then environmental sustainability. Now, I made a case for natural gas. I want to strengthen that case a little more. Natural gas is available. Africa and indeed Nigeria hold substantial natural gas reserves, as I had mentioned earlier. Affordability, natural gas, apart from nuclear energy, is the only primary energy source that can enable large-scale electricity base load generation with economies of scale. When you talk about efficiency in the energy sector, you talk about capacity factors. Natural gas has a capacity factor of about 54%, which is well above the solar, wind, and hydro, with capacity factors of 25, 35, and 37%, respectively. On emission of harmful gases, natural gas is relatively cleaner source of energy compared to other primary liquid sources, and therefore more environmentally friendly. So back again, oil and gas resources play a pivotal role in the growth, development, and economic stability of Africa. Africa's proven fossil fuel reserves are estimated at more than $15 trillion based on current market value. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, nearly 50% of export value is derived from fossil fuels. The global energy transition in its current form, therefore, puts at risk this crucial income that Africa desperately needs for development. Then to achieve the 1.5 degrees centigrade global warming target under the Paris Agreement, studies suggest that a third of current oil reserves, half the current natural gas reserves, and nearly 90% of current coal reserves must remain in the ground. Applying this to Africa will leave about $7 trillion of fossil fuel reserves stranded. The opportunity cost is therefore equally disproportionately high for Africa. Africa is said to need about $350 billion per annum for its energy needs going forward. Cost of capital in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to be a lot higher than cost of capital in Europe, in America. And so Africa, and indeed the investment world, will need to collaborate to create funding solutions in the context of the ESG requirements to be able to enable Africa to develop its energy needs. Then the fundamental questions for Africa, just two I put together. What is the potential for Africa's fossil fuels and related revenues in the context of the current decarbonization agenda of the energy transition? Two, as the world's lowest contributor to global emissions and as one of the poorest continents in the world, how can global finance be mobilized to achieve an equitable balance for Africa in the decarbonization agenda? So African governments will need policies to help de-risk projects to attract the necessary capital. There are examples of regional projects that have been undertaken. I mean, Nigeria has been at the forefront of that. One is the West African gas pipeline. I think progress is now being made on the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline. So these present examples that Africa can build on. The legal profession also has a fundamental role in this regard by helping to draft the necessary legislation to govern this regional project. I recall in my early days, development of the West African gas pipeline required a treaty to be signed by all these countries that the pipeline traverses today. So African solution should be value chain based and creating economic opportunities, jobs, energy access, and therefore lifting people out of poverty. In Nigeria, the Petroleum Industry Act, signed into law in 2021, it introduces significant changes to the legal and governance framework, the administrative processes, regulatory and fiscal terms, and host community engagements in the oil and gas industry. This was after a protracted development and drafting and debating period of over 2 decades, over 20 years. In between this whole protracted debate, the climate-driven transition then gained prominence. The question is, did we stop to look at the provisions being canvassed in the PIB to evaluate how it will enable or hinder the decarbonization agenda that underpinned the energy transition? So that is one thing the lawyers will have to engage with the energy industry to begin to look at the PIA as it is today and see whether the provisions there either enable or hinder this implementation of the energy transition, particularly in Nigeria. Today, oil and gas industry in Nigeria is undergoing transition in multiple areas. There's a growing emergence of indigenous producers, so the producers' landscape is changing. There is the onboarding of the PIA and embedding the multi-layer changes that the PIA is currently introducing into the sector. There is also the struggle for recovery from the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on the sector. If you recall, within that period, oil was reported to be negative in price. Some may argue that today is approaching, moving faster towards $100, but is that sustainable? There is also the unprecedented impact of oil theft that is going on in the country. The government has intervened by bringing in some sort of security arrangement that seem to be creating some benefits today. But the challenge will be, how can we sustain that, and what impact does it have on the industry? There's also the direct and indirect impact of the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war. that the industry is grappling with. So I believe that all these call for deepened engagements between the energy sector and not only with the legal profession, but with also the financing community. I therefore would like to commend the lawyers in energy for this initiative and hope that this forum will become the premier vehicle to birth these much-needed multi-sectoral, much-needed engagement for the success of the industry in Nigeria. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your patience and for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for that wonderful presentation. It just shows to us that being an industry practitioner for over 30 years, your perception about the energy industry is something we just need to learn from. So thank you. I have a lot of questions here to ask you, but just to save time, I'll get the second speaker up to give our presentation. Then we now go into the panel discussion. So permit me to introduce to you Mrs. Iro to come on stage. Iro Gamma, Iro Stars.
Thank you very much. I have a presentation. I complied with the legal instruction and directive to put together a presentation. So it would be good to share it, please, if you don't mind. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. While I wait for the presentation to come up on the screen, I would like to remain standing on the very solid protocol that has been established at the beginning of this program yesterday. I wish I knew jokes. I will be cracking jokes right now to buy us some time, making us laugh. I also wait for ICT to share my presentation, but I think that Mr. Victor has already and that's the problem with going after very erudite speakers. They end up taking a lot of your points, and you end up just referring to many of the things, very important and intelligent things that they have shared already. But he has set the foundation and the basis for the conversation that we will have this morning.
so much, Miss Eurostars. No, it is not. We're going to the panel discussion straight away. Okay. Okay. Let me, before you do that, I want to quickly comment on what she said. So, Ms. Zero, I wanted to challenge some of the things you mentioned. Because yesterday, when we had our discussion, we had the Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization here, was actually sitting where Mr. Victor is sitting right now. We also had Mr. Abel from UPRC. And the conversation going on in the room was that we should stop looking for outside people to bring their innovations. One, we should start we should look inwards. And the second one, Ms. Dafe Akpedeye, in our own session, made us understand that we should stop blaming government and asking government to either give us political will or their support and everything, and we should start from ourselves. But you coming this morning and giving us this your presentation again, we are now confused that. So where do you want, what do you want us to believe? Do you want comment?
So, I mean, I'm paying taxes. I will hold you accountable. I will look to you. Because, like I said, a single policy from you can completely derail how I have started from myself. So I start from myself, I innovate, I work hard, I start a business, it's thriving, and then you issue a policy that just throws years of hard work away. So I have to hold you accountable. I have to continue to speak to you. I have to continue to demand that, look, you listen to us. They have to continue to engage the stakeholders. They need to be open to getting that. So yes, I don't think, if all of us will abandon government and say, okay, who is government? If you know what I mean. So I think that it's about finding the balance. I'm not saying that we should sit down and wait for government to feed us. That's not what I have said. But we're not lazy people. Nigerians are resilient, we're innovative, we're ready to work. The young people are not lazy. But what we're saying is just give us the basic stuff that we need to be able to thrive. That's what we're not demanding, because this is not a process, but we're just asking for. I don't think it's out of place. So yes, innovation, I need to innovate, but I'm not going to innovate out of thin air. I need to go to a good school that has labs, that has chemistry labs, has physics labs, has equipment that's what's going to stimulate. I need to be able to watch stuff on the internet. It's a global village now. So how do I become part of that global village? It's the internet that has made it a global village. But if I can't even get network, I mean, come on. If you talk to the providers who have managed to scale some of these challenges, to bring some of these amenities to Nigeria, it's such an uphill task. Why? You go to Rwanda, you want to set up a business. In 3 hours, you have registered your business. In 3 hours, you have probably met 2 ministers. Why? Because their doors are open. They want you to come in. Because they know it's for their people. So the ease of doing business, Rwanda is open. Because when the country says, I am open for business, that's a country that is open for business. And it's driven by the government. It's not private sector. Because to set up a company, can I set up a company for somebody? I can't. I have to go to CSE. Who wants CSE? Who runs CSE? Okay, I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we can see the youthfulness and all that, the impatience and what have you. But what it goes to show is that what has brought us, Nigeria, to where we are today in the past 60 years or there, will definitely not take us next 60 years. Now, suffice as well to say that the oil and gas industry has equally been here for nearly as long as Nigeria has been. So when you talk about expertise, the industry has developed tremendous expertise, and they are all internal. In my company, we are nearly 100% Nigerians. And so when you talk about not going to call people from outside, yes, we agree. But you see, if you bring all the experts and they have the opportunity staring them in the face, there's one more thing you need. You need money. You need technology. And that is where you have no option than to look outside. The investment capital you need to unlock those opportunities come from the outside. And the challenge is that the risks embedded in businesses here, like you have enumerated most of them from the administrative standpoint, are quite huge. I know that in the finance industry, they have what they call patient capital, but sometimes, and most times, entrepreneurs are not that patient because they have to pay their bills and then also pay for the finance. So, and the opportunities there become the stumbling block. And the only way to remove those blockages, it's one, what is the regulatory environment like? Political will you talked about, make bold moves, okay? And the cost of the capital. You can get money, but at what cost? So these are the challenges. That's why I tend to align with what you referred to, Mr. Ansah and Mr. Omar spoke about yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Victor. Just to so maybe we should just give the benefits of the doubt. So let me invite Dr. Wisdom Enak for his presentation. Welcome, sir.
For inviting me here to speak. And, you know, at this point, you know, when you've heard from two top speakers that balance experience and energy, then of course, you know you're in for some problem in what you have to say in order to drive the point home. I'm particularly, at this point, going to focus on just giving a summary of what has been said already, but putting some perspectives out there to just put 80% of the world's energy, and undoubtedly is the foundation upon which global societies function. And even when we see this change in the mix, in the next 50 years, it will just be changing the mix with having more renewables, but of course, fossil fuels will continue to feature significantly in that mix. Because a sudden change in the global composition of these foundations can destabilize the global economies and key elements of modern society. And we saw that when we had the energy crisis in Europe, sequel to the Russian war, where we're hearing countries that said they're going to renewables, all of a sudden now go back to coal and open their system. So energy transformation, I like to state, is shaped by a much broader and fundamental shift in terms of prosperity, progress, politics, and the environment. On the cornerstone of this huge transition is decarbonization. The ongoing transformation does not only concern and apply to the energy sector, nor does it only focus on the change from one field to another or merely a technological leap. it is much broader and reflects a change and a transformation in terms of the values and also the way we understand the world around us today. The Great Transition features a gradual breakaway from older core values of security, reliability, and robustness, which the current energy systems are built on, to new values of sustainability, flexibility, and affordability, enabled by a completely new way of producing and consuming and also delivering energy. But this does not mean that the older frame of values will become obsolete or irrelevant. But what it means is that the weight, the center of the weight, is definitely being rebalanced. We all know that the Supreme Court the Paris Agreement, also since buttress that are talking about the climate, the global warming effects on the climate. We also know there's some pressure from the funders of energy projects who are now looking specifically, they're conscious about taking responsibility in energy exploitation, delivery, and consumption. And so it is important for me to say at this point that the call here is not for, let's move to renewable energy. It's actually a call for cleaner energy. That's really important to emphasize. And we need to understand that we can still demonstrate cleaner energy by efficiently consuming the current energy form that we have, producing and consuming it. So, to the investors that are in this, category, looking at how well the efficiency of our energy production and consumption, the competitiveness of a portfolio is not really based on break-even price alone, but it has to have, a component of environmental impact. Another noteworthy driver is the quest higher flexibility, convenience, and cleanliness of energy demanded by our customers, especially as their income increases. Okay, so let me jump to saying that achieving a commercially attractive energy transition in Nigeria would depend heavily on the use of existing oil and gas infrastructures, which are infrastructures that are adaptable, reliable, and affordable, which have been built around the conventional energy sources for decades, with billions of dollars in investment. It is noteworthy to state that it will be a missed opportunity for us not to plan for the role of these existing infrastructures in the energy systems of the future. Therefore, efficient repurposing of the existing infrastructure remains a key imperative for decarbonizing the Nigerian energy sector in the most cost-effective way. The task of controlling energy-related carbon emissions, as daunting as it may seem from today's perspective, may in fact turn out to be less obstructive, if indeed an acceleration of long-term structural change is called for rather than a departure in an entirely new direction. Substantial acceleration of decarbonization would both entail ambitious technological and policy levers. Policy levers such as the Nigerian Decade of Gas, if well implemented, would amount to a positive step in the right direction, as the exploration of gas, as one of our panelists already said, would avail us a more efficient and cleaner source of energy compared to liquid petroleum. Large-scale decarbonization to a net zero target will be extremely difficult anyway. And we have to be, we have to be face the facts, especially when it comes to, availability as well as affordability. Of course, there are potentially new decarbonization pathways, blue hydrogen, farming, conventional carbon capture. Yet, this technology are, at best in its early stages and, prototype stages. And it's yet to be applied largely and profitably on an industrial scale. But the good thing in Nigeria is that there are things that we can do, which are, of course, there are things we can do to make our energy consumption a bit more efficient, and there are things we can do from a consumption standpoint to ensure that we shift to cleaner and more affordable sources of energy. And in that way, the decarbonization options that are sort of low-hanging fruits to Nigeria could be stated as efficient consumption of our energy and moving to transition fuel like gas. So, even when we talk about decarbonization, it could be considered also as a blessing in disguise. And the reason I say this is because of the potential value accretive business opportunities that we could have from actually capturing, in the advanced, when we're able to get there, those advanced stages of the decarbonization process, capturing the carbon and then selling them off for products that would need those carbon as, as a feedstock. So, when we come to the consumption of energy, we need to really understand what is the landscape for consumption like. So we have, on one side of the curve, on the x-axis, we have, the variation of the fuel sources based on the prosperity of the consumers. And then on the other side, we also have how efficient it is. So it's very simple. The lower the income or prosperity level of the consumer, the more likely is going to consume a very, very least efficient fuel compared to the ones that are high income and, of course, high prosperity. What does that tell us? That and the big chunk of the consumption, especially in the rural areas, still have to do with people consuming less efficient fuel. So all government policies, all research focus must be looking at how do we move the consumption curve as we, across board, even with people of low prosperity, if you like to put that for lack of a better word, how can we make sure that we move them up the curve to be able to consume energy more efficiently? And I see a lot of research go on this, trying to make sure that even when you burn firewood, for example, or you use coal, for example, the capture some of that smoke that goes up there. So a lot of interesting research going on there. But in summary of some of the points I've already raised, African transition, energy transition must happen in a very stable and sustainable manner. We have to ensure that we are not just copying, just like Hero said, what the blueprints of the West, which, by the way, it's quite, the more you see, the more you look, the less you see. Because on one hand, they have the right arguments to twist facts at any point and even open up their coal or even worse, energy sources. Now, when it comes to consumption, a pyramid comes to mind. I think about is that across the pyramid of what I would try to call energy efficiency, what can we do? What can we do? From the least preferred option, of course, which is, baseline, to the most preferred option when we can get there. Energy that we have. So what can we do? Efficient consumption options is the most important thing. when we're dealing with that. So when we're, conventional energy, whether it be the oil and gas players, making sure that you basically go for the least expensive source of fuel. I mean, when I did projects with ExxonMobil, all our analysis was based on using the fuel gas so that we can at least take some credit from there. Then when you go up to low carbon energy, we start looking at things like, cooling, very efficient cooling and heating systems that are required. Then when we go up the renewable energy, then we start looking at things like solar, wind, biomass, and as it could be applied. Then when we go into the higher range, like efficient energy systems, we start looking at if it's abroad energy installations that are much better, and if it's here, efficient lighting. And of course, at the very top of the inverted pyramid is the energy reduction that is sort of putting in a behavioral change. Because as I said, even when we talk about digital, we talk about digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. At the very top there is we have to have that behavioral change embedded in anything that we do if we want to sustainably save, be more energy efficient. And of course, more efficient building designs, like Hero had already talked about. So, earlier, there is no way we can do that without building it around the energy sources that we already have at this point in time. Now, I did a little bit of study just to see, for example, taking LPG adoption in Nigeria and just looking at the rates of adoption of consumption of LPG as I think 2020 versus other countries. And the reason I did that was to ensure that we can contextualize exactly the lessons learned from how other countries have been successful. So I have some numbers to share. The LPG adoption in Nigeria is about 3 kg per person. In Brazil, we have 35 kg per person. In Senegal, about 10 kg per person. And then, Ghana, of course, all of them have bigger numbers of LPG consumption than Nigeria. But what are they doing? Again, this may not necessarily apply, but it's important for us to understand the differentiating factor in the way these people have run the program right from the design phase to the implementation phase to the monitoring phase. And that's very important because I think the end-to-end envelope of our policy is usually the problem. We have fantastic designs, and you can get that from just copying anybody from anywhere of the world. But if you don't then have a way to implement it, and then of course you begin to tailor it to the realities in our country. And then of course you monitor and understand how to objectively measure the efficiency of your policy design and implementation, and how to tell us objectively, not subjectively, how well you're performing with your policy implementation. Then of course we've got a problem. So if you look at Brazil, they introduced consumer credit for products that for LPG. They also brought in some subsidies for the cylinders, and then of course they had extensive cylinder rehabilitation programs that were run by the government, and that's how they were able to get to 35 kg per person. In Senegal, again, subsidy played a big role, and then they brought in fiscal incentives to support the import of LPG, cylinders. And then, of course, they also brought in policies to promote and support distributors to build the refining plants in urban areas to support that distribution. Then in Indonesia, of course, subsidy played another role, but this time subsidizing production of LPG, aggressive sensitization programs, and they also delivered free starter kits to assist households to convert their fuel source to LPG. And then in Ghana, they were supporting with distribution of subsidized cylinders free LPG transportation services, setup of national LPG fund, and also, they did the price, what's it called, the subsidy on LPG. But of course, I try to make sure that we, advise that we channel our subsidy to production rather than consumption. I prefer that just because of the way it has worked out for Nigeria. So again, why we're looking at these lessons learned is to ensure that we know that we're not alone in playing around, making sure that not only are we producing energy, but we are actually consuming our energy and doing so more efficiently and by promoting more efficient energy sources. So I'd like to sort of end by saying that any great transition anywhere in the world is always subject to uncertainty, obscurity, but also the hope for tomorrow. There's currently a continuous torrent of initiatives formulating into a river of change. As always, a few will lead the way, and we must remember that those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are eventually those that do change the world. Thank you very much.
Dr. Wisdom, it was like you were here yesterday when Prof was giving her presentation. So when she wanted to pen her own presentation, that was the same quotation she used. Yes. Okay. Oh. Oga said you should have those that are crazy. No, impatient. Oh, Hero said crazy too. Okay, you said, Oga said impatient. Oh. Wow. So thank you so much for that presentation. I just want to kickstart the panel session by coming to you to ask you about, you're speaking about the subsidies for government to subsidize a lot of things. You were telling us about how other countries have been able to subsidize with LPG cylinders and all that. But in Nigeria, the conversation is that we should remove subsidy. That is killing us. So what's your, how can we juxtapose those two together?
The thing is this, I like to say that in Nigeria, we are subsidizing the wrong thing. And I say that in light of the conversation that the government is saying. Forgive me if the figures are wrong, but I thought I heard that when they remove fuel subsidy, they're planning to get $800 million, I think, to share around and alleviate the pains of Nigerians. But again, how do you intend to do that? What you're intending to do is, let me put it in very simple terms. I don't know the sharing formula, but again, it's like sharing a national cake that doesn't exist. It's an illusion. So basically, you say, example, you say, I want to share 5,000 naira to X millions of Nigerians, right? The truth of the matter is that you first, fundamentally, you're going to subsidize consumption, which is the same problem we have. You're subsidizing the consumption of the product, not the production. Okay? The second problem I have is a personal experience that happened during the COVID-19 era. I came out of my house to go and cut my hair, and I said, I was asking for my barber, and they said he had run away. I said, run to where? What happened? They said he ran because he had some money on him that he wasn't supposed to have. I said, what happened? They said, you're not aware that some people came around the streets and the different areas asking, do you have a business? Do you have your BVN? Do you have account number? Give us, we'll fill form. Federal government will pay some money as business support during the COVID-19 to your account. Once they pay this money, give us 60% cash. Take 40%. And then that ends it. So when this guy got it, he did additional inquiry and found out that it was not actually free money. The money was meant to support, but then over time, the bank would debit that money back out of your account. So the guy said, you guys are trying to be smart by telling me to give you 60% cash and you vanish. And then he now ran with the entire money. Till today, he doesn't have a bank account. No, but the point is, we are very clever people. but clever in applying the wrong things. So by the time you start bringing consumption, the guy that is trusted to roll out that consumption, the subsidy on the consumption, has already found a very clever way to extract the money. So you see data. Minister for Finance will say, we have rolled out XYZ, we pay Nigerians maybe 10,000 every month for so many Nigerians. And you're asking your neighbor, have you gotten it? Have you got it? And you find that nobody knows somebody that has gotten it because the system is quite clever. So what am I saying? What this country apart from Ghana have done is they have cleverly found a way to subsidize production, because that way you can hold the people that you gave the subsidy. Those ones are few now. You can hold them. If you subsidize consumption, and I tell you somebody up in Zamfara was given 20,000 every month, where would you go? If you go there, I tell you he has died just yesterday. So I mean, I'm being serious. So we need to understand that we need to subsidize the right things. If we subsidize the wrong things, then you can't blame anybody if it fails. Again, political willpower. You have to have a collective sense of common purpose. You cannot roll out policies as if Nigeria is in isolation of the rest of the world, because they are laughing at us. I have people call me, say, Dr. you are in this country and they are rolling out this policy. I say, I'm helpless. So there's nothing I can do. I'm just helpless watching them until my time comes. So that is the point. I think I will round up by saying that the people who know something and have some value to add to the subject are usually not even called to the table. And the people that know nothing are the ones taking these decisions. And actually, they cannot see end to end, through and through the entire plan. As I said, through the policy design, policy implementation, monitoring and reporting. If you don't have that end-to-end outlook, then your policy won't work. And it has to be competitive vis-a-vis what is happening in other countries. The energy challenge in Nigeria is not entirely, unique and abstract from what the world is facing. The world is facing any challenge. The only thing is that we have some sort of, peculiarities that we need to adapt to, but so does other countries anyway. That's why we are here. If not, we won't. If there's no energy problem, then why are we seated here even talking about this? Thank you very much.
So the crux of the matter. Victor, sir, sorry, I'm used to calling you Oga. I wanted to ask, you were talking about the cost of energy in Nigeria. So I just wanted to ask that what steps is ITO or has ITO taken in ensuring that we can have what steps have you taken to contribute in making energy accessible and less costly?
Thank you. ITO Eastern is in oil and gas exploration and production. So what is our end product? Is crude oil. Do we have a direct influence on the price? We don't. It's global market driven. However, on the cost of production, what has terribly impacted not just ITO but the industry at large in Nigeria is the massive oil theft that had been going on, and for which I did reference in my speech. The intervention by the government that is beginning to yield fruits. So, production efficiency and theft elimination will ultimately create a delta from the price that will benefit both Nigerians, the company, and the shareholders, and possibly ultimately translate to lower prices of the end product. But bear in mind that most of our finished products are still imported. So you've got to deal with that difference between buying petrol in naira while you're importing it in dollars. Okay? And most of our crude is also refined outside and then brought back in for you. I don't know how you figure out our impact on the price. Okay.
Okay, before you drop the mic, I just want to ask, you know, during exploration of crude oil, you have some gas that you emit. So how effective has the company been able to reduce the flaring of its gas and channel it appropriately? And also, what percentage of those gas do you bring back into the country, and the percentage you push out for exportation?
Again, it's a very good question you asked. Maybe it's better to understand the process of oil production and the interrelationship with natural gas. Okay? When you produce oil, some gas comes with the oil, and that gas, in simple terms, is what is called associated gas. The percentage, or the ratio between the associated gas and the oil is usually small. In most production facilities, what you see them flare is the associated gas. Then there is the non-associated gas, which is when you drill purely for gas production. You have to be crazy, impatient, mad, and every other thing negative to drill for non-associated gas and flare it. Yeah. So it's like just bringing a bag of money and setting fire on it. Nobody does that. The gas that we produce from our facility today is all hardwired to the Nigerian LNG, which is the biggest export facility in Nigeria. All right? But you seem to be taking substantial amount of time, but there may be some others in the audience who have questions, except they have all passed it to you.
So I just want to ask one or two questions from the speakers before going back to the audience to ask those questions. So thank you, sir. It's really glad to hear that your company is not one of those companies that just flare their associated gas and they channel it back into the system.
Let me correct the statement slightly. There are flares that result as a consequence of production offset. And there are flares that happen when the ultimate off-taker is not available, or the facility that is off-taking it is not available. So the only way to stop such flares is to stop your oil production. So that then creates that, again, dilemma for the production companies. Okay?
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Ms. Zero, my question to you is that does energy demands, as energy demands how to outweighs affordability and efficiency, what should be our priority in solving the problem of energy deficit? What should be the priority? What should we focus on when we want to solve energy deficit?
Okay, so whose priority? Government, private sector?
So let's first of all come down to ourselves first, because one of the lessons we learned here today is start from yourself.
So I mean, how do we solve the energy deficit? It's to invest. We have to invest to make it available, right? So it's not sufficient. So we need to find a way to get more people having access. And one of the ways that people have more access is to be able to afford it, right? So there are a few companies who are investing strictly in other companies that their business models are for making energy more accessible to maybe rural areas or cleaner sources of energy. Like I know a company that sets up, so they have like a gas cooker that also charges phones and things like that. It's like all-in-one use, and it uses some kind of biomass or something like that, something that is available to. So they took it, they started they used the Benin City or Edo State as their pilot, and now they want to begin to cascade. So they got some investments. So there are a lot of funds that are available, obviously, for sustainable projects. So I think that if we had more people designing, so looking at our own problem and making it more local, like the solution more local, and designing the solutions towards tackling those problems, then there's funding that is available to chase that. That's not necessarily government side. So it really has nothing to do with government, but just saying, how do I begin to have more people gain access to cleaner sources of energy? And sensitization as well, so creating more awareness. So I always like to start with your immediate sphere of influence, exactly. So you work in an office, you live in a house, you run a business. So basically just being more energy efficient helps to, for power to go to other things, right? Or energy to go to other things other than just wasting it away in your immediate environment. So sensitizing, putting your own policies, things that are just within your own control, putting them in place to enable you at least add your own little quota. If we all did that, I think that we would now see like a mass effect of those behavioral changes. If I was to ride on Doctor's words earlier, saying that if you want to change or push a narrative, you need to first of all introduce that behavioral mindset has to change first before the change now takes place. Thank you.
What about for the government? I know you're waiting for that one.
No, I wasn't waiting, so I'm just trying to learn how to do that well on our own OIO, so but obviously for government, it was just like you said earlier, regulatory framework, right? To this issue of really investing in the infrastructure, I mentioned earlier about power companies that are privately owned, but are not really thriving. They're suffering, and when they go for their meetings, like I said, it's not really being privatized as it should be, right? So there's still a lot of government interference. So if government can focus on saying, look, let's make the environment friendly, business friendly, people who are able to operate, invest, then it's easier for me to continue to make those investments in the infrastructure that is required to increase access, to energy, like you said. Like Nigeria is producing, but we're not able. So I think we're generating. It's something about there's a mismatch between what we're actually generating and what we're able to transmit and distribute because of the infrastructure deficit that is there. But that infrastructure, what it would take to overhaul the infrastructure deficit, it requires a lot of funding. And he already mentioned, the challenges to attracting the funding that is required. And even if you try to get that funding in Nigeria at, what cost, it now no longer makes business sense. So government can help with their policies, give some incentives, give some tax breaks to businesses who are interested in making such investments, and just basically making the environment friendly. We're not saying come and do it. We're saying make it such that anyone who wants to do it is able to do it, and on a big scale that it makes the required impact.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wisdom, before I go to the audience, I just want to ask, is there hope for us? Looking at the rate of poverty we have in Nigeria, do you think or in Africa, do you think there is hope for us to have enough energy in Africa?
I think, yes, there is hope, because if we said there was no hope, then three of us seated here. I mean, it would really paint a bleak picture, and it would demoralize everyone here. I think there's hope, but I think the entire narrative is around the government being very intentional, not about talking about the problem, but about putting out very, effective measures to tackle the problem. You see, I tell people that when you're looking at investment anywhere in the world, bankability is top on what the investors look out for. And the component, a big component of that bankability, are some of the physical realities that you operate under. That's what determines a lot of your. I mean, yeah, you could talk about operating costs. That's we're talking about how to make your operating costs more efficient. But that physical realities, we need to sit down. And when we're talking about, say, for example, I think Iro had mentioned that the physical realities of our PIA is actually not in tune with the realities of the rest of the world. And we're not saying go and give free oil out, but we're saying try and make sure that even in your assessment, you can demonstrate competitiveness of your physical policies versus the rest of the world. Now, where is hope going to come from? We all know that the applicability of the renewable energy, predominantly in Nigeria, is to complement the central grid. Where I see it happen more is the government pushing measures to roll it out to the rural areas, where, of course, agricultural use becomes a key one, and also the high demand from the central grid would be, offset demand by taking those central grid. I see hope. It's going to be on two fronts: the policy levers and the technological levers. And that policy levers is the government concentrating on what they should be doing and making it regionally and globally. Get a mindset. We're not bringing renewable energy to come and compete with fossil or conventional energy that we already have. Rather, it is coming to complement and to serve the rural grid. Thank you.
Wow. I think that's the key word, because with the campaigns that have been going on over the years, what we've been hearing about this energy transition is transiting from fossil fuel to renewable. So if two types of energy come together to complement themselves, I think it will go a long way, like you just said. So I would like to take two people in the house and one from those watching us virtually. I don't know if we have any in-house, anybody that wants to ask any question. Please kindly raise up your hand. Okay, please can you help me please when you stand up, kindly introduce yourself and your company. So
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary from Avocado Practice, and my question is directed at Mrs. Irokama. So you were saying that you were talking about energy efficiency. I really enjoyed your session and everything, and every Nigerian is guilty. We are not energy efficient enough and all of that. But my question is Nigeria actually ready for that conversation? Because I think Mr. Victor in his presentation said that 54% of Nigerians do not have access to energy. And sometimes last year, I learned there's a US company that donates solar power to hospitals in the north because of the high infant mortality rate and all of that. So I just wanted to know if Nigeria is really ready for this energy efficiency conversation. Because how can you regulate what you do not have? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that question. And it's a valid point, right? But then the remaining 45% that do have access to energy should use it responsibly and efficiently. If we do not begin to build a culture, if we not begin to set the standard now, even if we're at less than 50% access, then we're not going to 90% or 100. So I think it's a case of saying there's a lot of focus on discussion. I think almost all the conferences I've attended in the last couple of years have been on the three or the trilemma, let me use that, which is energy affordability or access, energy security, and then making it in a sustainable way, environmental sustainability. So there's been all that conversation going on. I tried to talk about Shell. So Shell has a company called well, they don't own the company, but they work with the company All On. I don't know if you've heard of them. And all they're concerned with is investing in sustainable companies, so companies who are focused on renewable energy. So that company is at the renewable arm of Shell in Nigeria, and it funded over 100 companies that are battery storage, providing battery storage solutions, so solar panel businesses, etc. And most of those businesses are focused on the north as well. So I think that in no distant time we'll be able to see what numbers really and really monitoring the impact of some of these interventions. We see the 54% begin to reduce, right? Because you see that more people begin to gain access into some form of energy, right? And there should be that impact. So if we don't begin to teach people, begin to educate people, begin to make it, create that policy standard where you're doing infrastructure. I'm using energy saving bulbs. I'm investing in a building, in an office building structure. I have the building code to get the permits to build. I have to be using certain kinds of switches and bulbs, which also creates a market for those type of appliances as well in Nigeria, whether for assembly or whether for even production or importation. If we don't if we keep waiting, if you know what I mean, we can't keep waiting. We need to start. And I think that there's no better time to start having that conversation and taking action than now that we know. Now that we know the impact of not being energy efficient in whatever form. I don't think that it's too soon to begin to take action. That yes, Nigeria is definitely ready for the conversation, so that when we get to 90%, we already have a culture that values energy efficient, as a habit. Thank you. So I'll be challenging Mary that in your house, your heater switch, don't just think about the power cost, but also just thinking about I want to be energy efficient, and in your office too. Thank you.
Efficiency. Do we have any other question? Okay, please wait. Let's see if we have anyone virtually to ask us questions. So, do we have anybody virtually wanting to ask questions? Okay.
Good morning. I'm Timothy Davis from GLS. I have a question, or sorry, I can't remember your name. The gentleman, Mr. Victor. So my question is, as an industry player, and you said how you work in a company, IOTO, into oil and gas exploration and production. So my question is, what would you consider, what is the materiality of sustainability issues and ESG factors in accessing finance locally, regionally, and internationally?
Thank you. I suppose you walked in after I had delivered my paper, right? Good. The thing is, you need capital. And I did mention that the issue we have in Africa and indeed Nigeria is that we are rich in resource. We are very low on capital. So in order to unlock those resources, which are incidentally mainly fossil, we do have a lot of renewables as well. You will need to seek that capital from outside. And that capital comes at a considerable cost compared to other parts of the world. And that's why I challenge the lawyers in energy and I said this when you walked away just at the closing of my speech, that there needs to be a conversation between the energy industry, the lawyers, and also the financing community to try to fashion out a solution for Africa and indeed for Nigeria to enable the accelerated unlocking of these huge hydrocarbon fossil-based resources that we have. If you also saw the numbers that I mentioned in my paper, in Africa it's about $15 trillion. Yeah. And in Nigeria alone, you can imagine how much the hydrocarbon reserves that we have today are worth. And this is, for me, the major revenue source to build the green economy that we want. But time is running out. So you need to do this pretty quickly to unlock those resources, generate the revenue, and use the revenue to build that future economy that will be net zero compliant. And to do that, do not also forget the efficiency part. When you talk about efficiency, it spans both the supply and the usage. So the sort of systems that will offer you that amount of large-scale supply source, I have identified in my paper to be largely gas-fired power plants, because those are the power plants that you can get 1 gigawatt power plant at a go. I'm sure that if you want a 1 gigawatt solar power plant, I don't know how you're going to get that. Yeah. So, and if you also look at the efficiency factors of both solar and gas, gas has a considerably higher efficiency factor. So that provides you the choice, or the best choice, in order to build that large energy supply base that you need. And on the utilization, which is now
Mr. Victor, thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed everybody's presentation here. But I have this question because I've been longing to ask this question. Thank God you are in oil exploration sector. Sir, I have this question to ask you because I really can't wrap my head around it. Can indulge us before I go to the next one. What will it exactly cost, or what is the cost for getting a refinery working in Nigeria? Now, apart from that, I know that every businessman does business to make gains. And if we are making a business in an environment where to create because they have the companies also. People do, like I have an uncle who went to China and he used American standard, but with cheap labor. They import back to the United States. And he makes his gain. So when we come to Nigeria, where we have the crude oil, and thank God you are here, you guys are exploring. Is it not better, is it not even advisable that the crude are being refined here with cheap labor, then you can now take it out. Though when we get it here, we Nigerians, as the indigenous, we are bound to at least get it at a cheaper rate here before you now take it and compete at the international level. Yes, sir. The other one is this. When we talk about using the international benchmark dollar for the crude oil generally, and I want to ask, in Nigeria, somebody who is not earning up to $500 a month. So how realistic is it that, one, we know that consumption of, I'm still going to PMS and other crude oil related. Okay. How is it, we know that in Nigeria we use PMS more. Reasons are obvious. One is that we don't have steady energy. We don't have steady energy in Nigeria. So everybody, whether you are rich or poor, because you must charge your phone, because you must do one thing or the other with power, you need to have access to PMS. So you consume. Then transportation, you need to pay even when the government
Can
doesn't.
you please just go straight to the point? What is the question you want to ask, Mr. Victor?
Okay. So I am saying that going by all this, that we consume more of the PMS and that we make use of it, and we don't even have the capacity financially to compete with people regarding the benchmark using dollar. That's my point now. Using dollar as the price for us to acquire or to gauge the benchmark for oil. So is it fair to say that Nigerians as well, even being an oil producing nation, should also be looking at to getting fuel, getting crude oil on that same rate? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let me see if I can help you wrap your head around it. And to do that, first and foremost, I want you to understand that you produce crude oil. You refine crude oil in refineries, and then you get PMS and the rest of AGOs and the rest of them. Do you understand that, right? Good. And in Nigeria, we have refineries. You understand that? Now, because the refineries are not working optimally, what then happens is you produce, is shipped out, is refined outside Nigeria, which is not Naira based. So the international standard for costing and pricing for the industry is dollar. So that's the dollar component comes in the product that you eventually bring in. Is that clear to you so far? Which was, why do we go refine it outside?
What it will cost?
No, I'm coming to you. So because the large-scale refineries we have are not working optimally. The government itself has now initiated a new program, if you like, of what we call modular refineries. So the older refineries are in the capacities of over 400,000 barrels a day. The modular refineries can start from 25, 20, so it becomes a lot easier and cheaper to deploy and refine the oil, and then you can have it. But that still does not remove the dollar component. Okay, because most of the equipment and technology you need to produce the oil in the first place is dollar-based. Most of the technology and the instrumentation, the equipment you need for refining, you also have to procure in international markets. So you can't run away from linking ultimate prices to the dollar. All right? I'm going through this so that the wrapping will be complete. Now, your other question, which is direct, how much does it cost? Or how much will it cost us to set up a refinery in Nigeria, right? You know, when you come to the range of cars, you go from maybe Toyota Camry or whatever to a Rolls Royce. So how much does a car cost? Good. So when you now want to talk about what it will cost you to build a refinery, the cost varies. It varies from the size of refinery you're building. It includes the source of supply, the feedstock for the refinery. It may even include the technology that you're employing in the refinery. All right? So what people will be focusing on will be the unit cost per barrel of refining. And unfortunately, linking to your question, it's all also determined in dollars. So whichever way you look at it, you aren't running away from the dollar linkage. All right? Thank you. You still look a bit confused. So it's fully wrapped now? Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Victor. I want to use this opportunity to thank our speakers. I'm going to start with my Oga at the top, Mr. Victor Okoroko. I know you're very busy. I know you flew all the way into Lagos just yesterday for this event, and you are going back tomorrow. So we want to say thank you for taking out time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And Mr. Victor is an avid supporter of the network. So I'll continue to disturb you. You know, there's no place you put me. I will disturb you for the sponsorship. I'll leave subscription for you. But I know you are always reading, and we appreciate you. On behalf of the network, we say a big thank you. Thank you, sir. So to our Madam Eurostars, you see, we baptized you today. So I also know that you're traveling too, and you also came in just for this conference. And Ms. Zero, the first time I knew her, you don't know this, but I'll tell you today. I was in one event in, I think, shipping, the shipping event in Lagos. So I was in the hall, I was sitting down, you were one of the speakers, and I was like, who is that young girl that is managing director of company? And I was telling someone by my side, I said, well, maybe because her father owned the company and all that. And I said, no, you just need to know her. She's made of stores. And we can all attest to it when she's having a presentation here today, that it's not because she's a daughter of someone that is a public figure that she's privileged to hold those kind of positions. She has also been able to develop herself to hold that position. I think you've done your job. So you make me proud. So now I kind of have to unbias my mind when I see such people, and I'm like, oh, it's because they have the privilege, and it's not because we have the same level playing field. So it's just for all of us that we come from humble beginnings to also just buckle up our shoes and tie our belts very well, to also put in that effort, develop ourselves, and make the sky our starting point. So kudos to you. You are a mentor to we, the upcoming youth, that we are looking at your face, and we are hoping that when we grow up, we want to be like you. So thank you very much, and thank you for also being accessible to everyone. So thank you. So I would like to thank my guy here. So Dr. Wisdom Enang is always someone that I admire in the industry. You'll be shocked at his age, but I won't tell you. I won't tell you. You'll be so shocked. The day I learned his age, I looked at myself. I said, Rakiba, so what are you doing? Forget the big stature. Oga Wisdom. No. I'm impressed with the level of things you've been able to achieve. You know, it just continues to tell us that we don't have any choice. We should stop sleeping. We Nigerian youths. We should not give the people that call us lazy Nigerian youths that opportunity. So again, I know you are also very busy, and I think you flew from Calabar yesterday, Uyo, just for this event. So you see, he's also a very good member of the network. So thank you so much. So all the panelists are members of the Lawyers Energy Network, except Ms. Zero Star. So we're expecting you to join the network very well. Just to conclude this session, I'll call on one of our very big ogas to come and help us in appreciating our speakers and also present our word of appreciation to them. Mr. Israelite, please. He's the partner of commercial and energy law practice. A round of applause, please.
All right. So the accolades have been enunciated. My job is just to hand over these emblems of excellence. Thank you very much, sir. I think it says, okay, I was looking at it wrong. Apologies. I was going to return it to them to fix it. But just for the records, Victor is my guy as well from many years, so let me just put that on record. Thank you, sir, for coming. We appreciate your sacrifice and your labor of love. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. All right, so the next plaque, which is an appreciation award, but more than that goes to Mrs. Iro Rama Ogbaifun. And so the final one to be handed out in this moment is to none other than Dr. Wisdom Enang. And I have to admit that this is the first time, as far as I'm aware, that I'm meeting Dr. Wisdom in person, but it's somebody I feel like I know already, because just like Rukiba said, his presence and impact in the industry is rather ubiquitous, and I'm not sure that you can quite discuss this industry without reference to the contribution he makes. Thank you very much, sir.
Let's rise to go for the tea break outside. Thank you. Come back 30 minutes after for the second session.
Don't do it. If you see anybody vandalizing, destroying, or stealing any of EKDC's equipment, do well to report such acts immediately, because any of our equipment that is vandalized